Okay, so let's dive in. We're looking at Malachi chapter 3 today.
Right. And it sets a pretty intense stage right from the get-go.
Yeah, it talks about this time of anticipation. A messenger coming, the Lord himself arriving.
But it's also, well, it's clearly a tough time for the people. They're facing divine scrutiny, some pretty direct accusations, too.
Exactly. There's this real tension, isn't there, between um, judgment and purification on one hand?
And the sense of backsliding from the people, but also eventually a promise of blessing for the faithful. It's quite a mix.
So it starts with this messenger preparing the way. Then boom, the Lord suddenly comes to his temple.
And the question immediately follows, like, who can actually stand it? Who can endure his arrival?
Because, as it says, he will be like a refiner's fire or a launderer's soap. That's
Right.
pretty strong imagery.
It really is a refiner's fire. Well, that burns away the dross, the impurities. It's hot, intense work.
And launderer's soap back then wasn't like gentle detergent. It was harsh stuff, meant for serious scrubbing.
Exactly. So this arrival isn't just glory and light, it's a purification process. And notice where it starts.
Right, with the Levites, the priests, the temple workers,
Yeah.
to make their offerings acceptable again.
Judgment beginning at the house of God, you could say. It starts with the religious leadership.
Okay, so purification begins there.
Yeah.
But the chapter quickly broadens out, doesn't
No,
it?
absolutely. It connects that lack of reverence directly to how society functions or malfunctions.
God says he'll be a swift witness against sorcerers, adulterers, perjurers,
Uh,
the expected things, maybe.
But then it adds those who defraud laborers of their wages, who oppress the widows and the fatherless, and deprive aliens of justice.
Wow. So spiritual health is directly tied to social justice, to how you treat the vulnerable. It's very clear.
It is, and despite all this, God makes this incredible statement, I, the Lord, do not change.
Which is why he says they haven't been completely wiped out,
Uh,
because he's constant.
and he offers this path back. Return to me, and I will return to you. Simple, right?
You'd think. But their response is almost defiant. How are we supposed to return? Like, they don't even see the problem.
Which leads to maybe the most startling part for many people reading this.
Yeah, God's answer to how do we return is, will a mere mortal rob God, yet you rob me?
I mean, talk about an accusation, and of course they ask, how? How are we robbing you?
The answer, in tithes and offerings. It's incredibly specific, tangible.
It suggests their turning away wasn't just, a feeling. It had practical results. The system for supporting the temple, the priests, the poor was failing because of their neglect.
He even says they're under a curse because the whole nation is doing it.
But right after that heavy statement, there's this sudden, almost audacious invitation.
It really is. It pivots hard. God basically says, look, bring the whole tithe in. Put me to the test on this.
Test me in this, he says, and see if I won't open the floodgates of heaven and pour out blessings so much you can't even contain it.
It's amazing. It's not just a command. It's like, dare me. Test my faithfulness through your generosity.
And the promised blessing isn't vague either. It's tangible stuff, protecting crops, fruitful vines, being recognized as blessed by other nations.
But, the text doesn't shy away from how people were actually feeling. It's quite honest about their complaints.
Yeah, it records them saying things like, it's futile to serve God, or what was the point? What did we gain?
They're looking around, seeing evildoers prosper and the arrogant blessed and thinking, what about us?
Which is such a relatable feeling, isn't it? That sense of unfairness, that the wicked seem to get ahead.
Totally. But then the chapter draws this sharp contrast between those complaining.
And those who feared the Lord. It says they talked with each other, and crucially, the Lord listened and heard.
And this scroll of remembrance was written for them. Like God is taking notes, specifically of those who remain faithful even when it's tough.
It shows that even when cynicism is rampant, God sees and values that faithful remnant. He calls them his treasured possession.
He knows them, he hears their conversations, their mutual encouragement, and promises to distinguish them in the end.
Yeah, to spare them when the final line is drawn between the righteous and the wicked, those who serve him and those who don't.
So wrapping this up, Malachi 3 really hits you with this idea of a purifying God, an intense arrival.
Right, calling out not just inner failings, but also their real-world impact, like exploiting people.
And then that bombshell accusation, robbing God through neglecting tithes and offerings.
But then the surprise invitation. Test me with generosity. Expect overwhelming blessing.
And finally, acknowledging that humans struggle with perceived injustice, but highlighting the faithful who are seen, heard, and remembered by God.
When you think about how this connects to our lives, Well, it forces you to think about accountability, doesn't it?
Yeah, for our own actions, maybe how we participate in systems, how we respond when things feel unfair.
And this idea of testing faith not just through hardship, but through like radical trust and giving.
So it leaves you with this really provocative thought, this kind of paradox. God as the refiner's fire, demanding purity and accountability.
And yet also the God who says, test me in this, test my generosity with your own and see what happens. How do those two ideas sit together for you? How does that shape your view of faith and responsibility?